Hey guys, how's it going? Danconia, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Boy, it feels good to say that. There is no fancy intro this time because not all the teams have their names and their colours yet, and I don't want to be unfair to them not including them into the in the intro, so that's the way it is at the moment. The new intro will be there. It's just waiting for all these teams to get their stuff sorted. So, do you love the Overwatch League? Because if so, you can celebrate it on Valentine's Day. The Overwatch League returns on Thursday, February the 14th, 2019, and it is being pushed back slightly, and the structure has changed slightly, so we're going to cover that in this first part of the video, and in the second part of the video we're going to cover some transfers. And when I say transfers, and when I say some, I mean a lot of transfers. Okay. 8 new teams will join the Overwatch League in its 2019/second season. These teams will be Atlanta, Paris, Toronto, Washington DC, Chengdu, Guangzhou, Hangzhou, and Vancouver. The Atlantic Division will now comprise of Atlanta, Paris, Toronto, Washington DC, Boston Uprising, Florida Mayhem, Houston Outlaws, London Spitfire, New York Excelsior, and the Philadelphia Fusion. It's a pretty stacked division, that one. The Pacific Division will be Chengdu, Guangzhou, Hangzhou, oh my god, Vancouver, Dallas Fuel, Los Angeles Gladiators, Los Angeles Valiant, San Francisco Shock, Seoul Dynasty, and the Shanghai Dragons. The new look Shanghai Dragons. So, there's a few interesting ones here. Paris, we have another European team, but not as many new European teams as we thought, because Paris is the only new one. Washington DC is owned by, and I can't remember the name of the organisation, but I believe the organisation has a rivalry with Cloud9. Cloud9 are the owners, if you didn't know, of your current league champions London Spitfire. So that should be quite an interesting rivalry to have in that division, even though perhaps they don't come from the same country. But there are quite a few new inclusions from China: Chengdu, Guangzhou, and Hangzhou. Oh boy, please get some names, because that's really difficult to say when they've all got Zhu on the end. But a lot more Chinese teams. There's more Chinese teams than there are Korean teams now. Very interesting, and Vancouver as well. Awesome teams to see in the league. It takes us up to 20 teams. Same as the Premier League in England, if you wanted a fact. Anyway, the 2019 format changes because it will see 20 teams play 28 matches over 4 5-week stages, for a total of 7 matches per stage. To help players, and I'm reading this from the Overwatch League website, to help players stay at the top of the game, as well as giving teams more opportunities to visit their home cities during the season, a more flexible schedule will see teams play 0, 1 or 2 matches a week, creating more breaks for players. So some teams may not play in a week. Interesting. Very interesting. Didn't think they'd go down that route. The stage finals are also being overhauled. They will return after stages 1, 2, returning into 2019 after stages 1, 2 and 3. The top 8 teams from each stage will make the stage finals, which is expanding to become a seeded playoff bracket, much like the overall finals did this previous season. According to stage record, divisional winners will be seeded into the number 1 and number 2 slots, followed by the next 6 teams in the standings. The All-Star Weekend took place at the end of the 2018 season. That is changing. The All-Star Weekend becomes an All-Star Summer Vacation, and it will take place in the middle of the season between stages 2 and 3. This gives the players a break, I would presume, but don't know whether I particularly like it. But hey, most competitive sports leagues have winter breaks. Some have summer breaks and some have just breaks. I know for a fact that the football leagues or the soccer leagues in Europe, they will take a break in January. Mainly because conditions in Europe in January generally stop you from playing football anyway, unless you have a really, really nice stadium to play it in. The only football league that I believe doesn't stop is the Premier League and the English leagues, but that's a different story. Anyway, there will be a break between stages 2 and 3 where we have all these all-star fun and games. Now, postseason is changing. Playoffs play in. Again, I need to read this. As in the inaugural season, the divisional champs and the next 4 teams in the standings, regardless of division, qualify for the playoffs. But in next year, 2 additional teams will also make the playoffs, based on the results of a play-in tournament following Stage 4, pitting the 7th through to 12th place teams in the overall standings against one another in an epic win-or-go-home bracket. So basically, a mini stage finals. But again, between 7th and 12th place. So that's the overhaul for the structure of the season. 20 teams. In a week, your team might not play any games. It might play 1 game, it might play 2 games. The stage finals will have more teams in them. The end finals will have more teams in them. But that will be decided by another playoff bracket where the teams that finish 7th all the way through to 12th place in the league standings will play against each other for those final places. Again, it had to change somewhat because there's just more teams. It had to change. So, a lot to take in. And I'm not finished there. So, as we have 8 new teams, not only have we got new rosters, we've got new colours, we've got new names. Problem is, there's only 2 teams that have got names and colours at this stage, unfortunately. And that is Atlanta and Toronto. Atlanta are the Atlanta Reign, R-E-I-G-N, and I believe they play in silver and red. And then Toronto is the Toronto Defiant, and they play in black and red, or like a dark grey and red if you want to be really, really picky about this. Awesome. Toronto Defiant sounds like an awesome name, to be quite honest. And so does Atlanta Reign. We don't know what the other teams are currently cooking up in their branding, but I'm sure it'd be awesome. I would have thought the next one out would probably be someone like Paris or something, because Paris have made a lot of moves, as we'll talk about in a minute. And Paris, I'm kind of envious of them in some respects of what they've done, and that's not a joke about Dallas Fuel. But let's get on to, it links into the signings. So what I'm going to do is, I remember I did do one back along about signings, and this one's going to be much bigger. I'm going to start from Seagull. Seagull is now retired. If you didn't know already, I expect you do know if you're in the Overwatch scene. He is now just a streamer, and I think that's good for him. Anyway, Fisher moved from the LA Gladiators to Seoul Dynasty. You probably would have noticed that if you watched the All-Star weekend at the end of last season. IDQD, Nomi and Dak have been released from the San Francisco Shock. KDG and Changoon have come in as coaches for the Seoul Dynasty. Changoon, if you might remember the name, he was with the champions London Spitfire last season. So, quite a name to pull in. Gambler is now a streamer for Seoul Dynasty, no longer an actual registered player. Wizard Hyong, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce names very well, has left the New York Excelsior as a coach. Snow, Avast and Kalios have been released from the Boston Uprising. I'm going to start speeding up because there's a lot of stuff to get through. Iremix, Asher and Silkfeather have been released from the Los Angeles Gladiators. Janus has been released from the New York Excel. Then we get to Shanghai Dragons. Kong and Nyate have been released as coach and an analyst respectively. Jushu, Roshan, Altering, Five King, Free Phil, Sky, Addo and Damon have all been released as players. Basically most of the roster. Fact Fiction has been released from Houston Outlaws. Mistakes has been released from the Boston Uprising. Shadowburn, Joe Meister and Dayfly have been released from the Philadelphia Fusion. Ooh, keep going. Miro, Guido and Wekid have been released from the Seoul Dynasty. Coach 815, who is Korean apparently, has signed for the London Spitfire as a coach, as you might expect. Clockwork is now on the Houston Outlaws staff, no longer a player. Mendo Kusai is also a content creator now for the Houston Outlaws instead of a player. Coco is now assistant coach for the Dallas Fuel instead of a player. Chips Hyen has been released from the Dallas Fuel. Florida Mayhem have released Logix, Zappis, Manhattan, Swoosh, Zebusai and Zupper. They are now unassigned. Kate has moved from Last Night's Leftovers to, as a manager, to the team for Washington. Los Angeles Valiant have released Finzi, Numlocked, Verbo and Grim Reality. Grim Reality was coach. Bishop, remember him? Coach for the London Spitfire until they got rid of him. He is now a coach for the Toronto Defiant. Then we get on to some new signings for the new teams. Analyst for Atlanta Reign will be Danny. Coaches for the Atlanta Reign will be Casores, Silence and Sephi. Zephyr, who was a flex for Soul Dynasty last season, is now part of the Florida Mayhem. Janice, who didn't stay unassigned for long, is now part of Team Washington. Wizard Hyung, who has left the NYXL, is now part of Team Washington also. Kuki, who was a tank for Soul Dynasty, is now part of the LA Valiant. Smurf, who originally played for the GG Sports Academy, which isn't that Houston Outlaws Academy, now plays for the San Francisco Shock, and Dante has moved from the San Francisco Shock to Houston Outlaws. Avala, who was part of Metabellum as a coach, is now part of Washington. MKL, who was an analyst for Last Night's Leftovers, is also part of Washington now. Blue Haas, who was a coach for Kongdu Panthera, is now head coach for Shanghai Dragons. Apply and Hagapun have been promoted from Mayhem's Academy to Florida Mayhem's main team. Hagapun you'll recognise from London Spitfire, they let him go earlier on in the season. Elk, who was part of the Fusion University, is now part of Philadelphia Fusion's main team. Rascal, who you might recognise from his time at London Spitfire, then Dallas Fuel, and then disappeared. He was part of NRG, he is now part of the San Francisco Shock. Kai, remember him? Left Fuel, now he's left Houston Outlaws. There was some bit of weirdness going on with optics, so don't know what's going on there. Anyway, DPS signing for the Florida Mayhem, BQB, another Korean, along with signing Swoon from NRG and Chris from Meta Anthena. 3 new signings for the Florida Mayhem, all of them Korean. You notice a trend here. Closer, who was a support for the London Spitfire, is now a part of the Dallas Fuel. Guard, who was a DPS for Element Mystique, is now part of the London Spitfire, as is Krillin, who was previously unassigned. Hotba, who was part of the Philadelphia Fusion, is now part of the Guangzhou team, and Goomba has moved from assistant coach at the Valiant to assistant coach at the Boston Uprising. Soon and Damon was a coach, Soon obviously you'll probably know him, Soon, have left the LA Valiant. More on Soon later. Why Not has come in as a coach for the Soul Dynasty. Michelle and Marv1 have moved from Lucky Future Zenith to Soul Dynasty, and I don't know how to say this, but Jesse has moved from Element Mystique to Soul Dynasty, so you're going to see a pretty new Soul Dynasty roster here. Blaze, who was playing for the Gladiators Legion, LA Gladiators Academy team in Contenders, is now playing for the Boston Uprising. New signings for the Shanghai Dragons, my friends. Guardian as Flex, Dime as a DPS, Diding as a DPS, Youngjin as a DPS, Luffy as a support, and Koma as a support. All are Korean. Again, you notice a trend here. Then we move on to Paris. This is the entire Paris roster as we have it right now. Cruz as a support. Cruz you might know from the United Kingdom's Overwatch World Cup team, and he's been around a lot in Contenders, recently with Toronto. Cruz is part of the Paris team along with LH Cloudy on tank. You'll notice him from contenders if you watch it. Mex is the manager for the Paris team. Damon is the coach for the Paris team. Hip on support. Ben Best on tank. Again, you might recognize him. Finzi on a flex. Danier on DPS. Nikoda on DPS. Shadowball on DPS. And soon has moved to the Paris team. Is it any surprise? Now, they've gone with a really French heavy roster. Props to the Paris team for staying true red, white and blue. We didn't do that, but we are owned by Cloud9 over here in London. Well, I'm not in London, but over here in the UK. Woo! Nugget has moved as a manager to New York Excelsior, and Fefe is player development coach at Paris. Violet is now part of the San Francisco Shock after being with O2 Ardent, and the Toronto Defiant have also signed two Korean coaches in Bubbly and Don, and also an analyst in Barry. Barry. He's German. Team Giganti have lost their coach Saita to Paris as well. Decay and Raw have moved from Chengdu Panthera to the Los Angeles Gladiators. Kai Kai. Again, another name to crop up. He is now a coach for his third Overwatch League team, Paris. Good luck, Paris. Neko, who was part of the Boston Uprising, is now part of the Toronto Defiant. Envy, who was playing his days out with Metabellum, is now part of Toronto Defiant as well. Mazza, who was a support for Team Giganti, has moved to the Atlanta Reign. This is when it gets real interesting, by the way. Pokpo and Dako, who were the two tanks for Element Mystique, Flex Tank and Main Tank, they are both Korean. They are part of the Atlanta Reign. Really, really nice base to build on there for the Atlanta Reign. It's always good to try and get two tanks together who can work together really well in your team. Really, really good planning from the Atlanta Reign there. Arista, who was part of the Lucky Future Zenith, is also a DPS for the Atlanta Reign now. Nlar, who was part of the last night's leftovers, he is Russian, is now part of the Atlanta Reign. And then this gets interesting. Kodak, German support, now part of the Atlanta Reign. Gator, tank, American, now part of the Atlanta Reign. This is the interesting one. Danish DPS, known as Defran, now part of the Atlanta Reign. Oh boy, Defran's back. Ivy and Stella are DPSs. They are Korean and they are part of the Toronto Defiant, moving from O2 Ardent. Flower, remember him? Last World Cup, Hanamura against the Americans? Flower was bloody brilliant. He was part of XL2 because he wasn't old enough to play for the Excelsior. He is now old enough, so he has been moved from XL2 to Excelsior's main team. Expect Flower in Season 2 of the Overwatch League. Oh, that's daunting. Oh dear. Aid is now a support for the Toronto Defiant. He is Korean. Yakpung is Korean. He is a tank. He was part of O2 Ardent as well, and he's now part of Toronto Defiant. And Toronto... Wait, that's actually confusing. Toronto Esports, who are the contenders team, have let Color Hex and Axiom join the Boston Uprising. Oh boy. It's a long, long list. I'm sorry, I've pumped you full of information there. That is all of the transfers up until the 30th of October. There's going to be a lot more, I expect. We still don't have full rosters for Guangzhou, Hangzhou, Vancouver. I've heard nothing about Vancouver. Washington, we don't have a full roster of. There are still announcements in terms of names and colours for some teams as well. Remember, we've only had two. I would assume that the next to announce will probably be Paris, considering they've got their full roster all ready to go, but who knows? There are some really interesting things going on here. The most promising so far is Atlanta Reign, in my opinion. There's some real good players that haven't been in the Overwatch League before that want to prove themselves in that team, and with a really solid tank base, 2 tanks who've played together in another team, know how they play, know how to do stuff, you know, that's a really good base to start from. And DeFran is an insane DPS. You want a Soldier 76, a Tracer? DeFran will be fantastic. Erster is also very good from what I've heard, and so is Nar. So I think we've got a really good team on our hands with Atlanta Reign. Also, Paris, I think, could actually surprise a few people. Obviously, having the big pools of people like Soon. Ben Best has always been a really good tank. I'm just surprised I haven't seen him in the Overwatch League until now. There are some really interesting things going on. And obviously, Seoul Dynasty have been making a lot of moves here. They've now got Fisher as their main tank. They've got some really good players in. I think Seoul Dynasty are going to try and make a push this season, because they obviously had a really disappointing season last season to not even qualify for the playoffs. That was, like, unbelievable when we started out that season, to think that Seoul Dynasty not only wouldn't win it, but they wouldn't reach the playoffs at all, was pretty insane. And then we've got completely unknown entities like this Shanghai Dragons side. Who knows what the Shanghai Dragons side might do? Imagine if Shanghai went and won it. Bottom without a win in season 1, and then season 2 you go and win it all. God, that would be a story. Imagine that. Anyway, that is the Overwatch League Roundup I wanted to give you. There's a lot of information in there, and I'm getting a sore throat. Also, if you didn't know, Jane is now a coach for Dallas Fuel. Oh boy. But there's been some big shake-ups at some teams, most notably Seoul Dynasty and the Shanghai Dragons. And obviously you've got these 8 new teams. Some are still to announce their rosters. Some are just like Vancouver, they're really quiet. Really, really quiet. I get the feeling that Vancouver might announce something very soon. And then you've got some big players of yesteryear coming back to the Overwatch League. Coming back to the Overwatch League, but entering the Overwatch League, like DeFran. And also this opens the door. DeFran has a shady track record, I guess we could say. But this also says that the Overwatch organisers and Overwatch League are open to forgiveness, because obviously DeFran did do bad things in the past when he was part of pro teams in the past, and he is now reformed, we hope, and we want to see someone like that in the Overwatch League. Someone who is just insane. And if you're an XQC fan, then there's always a door open, I would assume, because of this, I would say. Although I don't think we will ever see XQC back in the Overwatch League. I think he's suited to streaming, and I think that's where he should stay. As much as I want to see his fantastic plays in the Overwatch League, I think he's better off as a streamer. He can have his own opinions, he can do what he wants, pretty much, within reason. And he doesn't have to stay on brand, which is difficult for some people, I can understand that. But that is all your new teams, that is your new structure for the league, and that is that's a lot of new players coming into the league. It's going to take a lot of getting used to. And I expect some of the people are going to have to learn French. I was not very good at French. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.